All right, good afternoon, everybody. My hair is a freaking mess. Gosh darn it. I am. I just now, like in the last 3 minutes, pushed the final commit up to my repo that I'm going to be working from today. That was just detailing all the instructions. I'm going to be completely honest. This has been the most difficult stream I have ever prepared for. So let's just go ahead and get right into it. So what we're going to be covering today is OAuth 2.0. And what OAuth 2.0 is essentially is a security mechanism. And you might be wondering, well, I'm a machine learning engineer. I am not a cybersecurity professional. So I actually put in my notes here. The very first thing is a big shout out to all of our cybersecurity professionals because this is some complex stuff. And thank you for handling all this for us, typically speaking. This is not just exclusive to cybersecurity professionals, though. Security is always top of mind for anybody that's working in IT. And so the reason that I am specifically interested in OAuth is because I'm actually just going to go ahead and jump right into sharing my screen here. So what we're actually going to be looking at, before I share my screen, what we're going to be looking at just very, very briefly, we're not going to touch it in the stream, is Bedrock Agent Core. If you were, so AWS Bedrock Agent Core. So if you're not familiar with what AWS Bedrock Agent Core is, it's essentially a managed server, it's a service offered by AWS specifically for deploying AI agents. And so specifically, like one of the things that it offers in there is something called the Bedrock Agent Core Gateway. And what Agent Core Gateway, and not just Agent Core Gateway, but there's another facet called Identity, is it helps to manage inbound and outbound authorization configurations. So in Gateway specifically, imagine with an AI agent, you want to leverage some sort of tool with your agent. So what the gateway is doing is it's setting up this mechanism for your agent to be able to call whatever sort of downstream tool that you need. And so typically speaking, whenever we think about these downstream tools, such as MCP servers or whatnot, we need to make use of OAuth authentication. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and you will see exactly why we are getting into here. So this is the screen for getting into, or like if you were going to create a gateway from scratch. And what I want you to see here, so if I were to go down here, so by default, they would have you try to create just a new quick creation thing through Cognito. But when you select this other thing called use existing identity provider configurations, then you start to see some additional information here. Let me zoom in on that. And so you'll see like the discovery URL, allowed audiences, allowed clients, allowed scopes, things like this. And this is the part that really confused me because I don't know what, prior to this, me doing the content for the stream, I wasn't really aware of a whole lot of this stuff. I knew what OAuth was at a lighter extent, but when I saw something like OpenID configuration, what does that mean? So what we're going to be doing in this stream is we are going to be covering a high-level overview of what OAuth is. And so again, we're not going to do anything with Bedrock Agent Core anymore today. I just wanted to show an example of why this is an important topic for somebody like me as a machine learning engineer. And this is likely going to be a popular topic, even if you're not a machine learning engineer. If you're a standard software engineer and you're not even a cybersecurity professional, having an understanding of what's going on here is still going to be helpful. So we are going to walk through conceptually what OAuth is, and then we are actually going to apply it in two forms. So the thing with OAuth is that you can actually set things up across a number of different options and services. There's a ton of OAuth providers out there. So the two that we're going to cover today is AWS Cognito and then Azure Entra ID, formerly called Azure Active Directory or Azure AD. So let us just go ahead and jump into things. Now, if you do want to follow along with me, like I was noting, I did create this Git repo here. You can find it under my personal GitHub, just called OAuth tutorial. And then I tried to make this as clear as possible for you all. So you can see here, there's a whole start here sort of thing, walks you through the steps of so this is kind of assuming that you're not watching the stream or if you were watching the stream right now and you want to go back later and do things hands-on yourself, that's what this whole guide here is for. And I got a lot of information. And so because this was such a complex topic for me, I actually manually wrote this entire README. I didn't use any AI tools at all because I really wanted to be sure that I understood this. And to be honest, even after going through all this, I still am not 100% sure about everything. I'm knowledgeable enough now to know kind of the basic gist of what we are going to be doing with, or how OAuth works, and the things that we need to keep in mind for OAuth as we're doing things like Bedrock Agent Core or whatever else. So I think the first thing that is important to understand is what is authentication, what is authorization. So these two terms. Do I want to keep this up here? I guess I'll keep this up here, but I'm not going to read off of this. You're welcome to read this in your own time. I'll just talk through it though. So basically, you have authentication and authorization. These are two different concepts, technically speaking. However, they play together interchangeably to form, what you would actually need for a full understanding of OAuth 2.0. So first of all, what is authentication? Authentication is essentially this idea of identifying who you are. So if you think about me going up to into any website, whether it be Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever, I don't want just anybody logging into my personal account. I want somebody that knows it is me. So that's essentially what authentication is. Now, authorization, this is something that's, again, adjoining but a little bit different. So where authentication is just simply verifying your identity, who you are, authorization comes along and notes who or what sort of activities you can do. So maybe it's a read activity or it's a write activity, etc. So actually, I'm going to stop sharing for now because I'm getting distracted myself. But so that might be a little confusing. So I think that I came up with a bit of an analogy here to kind of help drive things home. A really simple kind of analogy, one that I think we can all relate to, and that is staying at a hotel. I actually myself this past week I took my kids had President's Day off, and there was a Teachers Institute Day the day after. So I actually took my kids up to Great Wolf Lodge in Wisconsin, the Wisconsin Dells. And if you don't know what Great Wolf Lodge is, all you need to know is basically a hotel that has an indoor water park in it. So kind of neither here nor there. But anyway, when you think about your stay at a hotel. So generally speaking, you are booking in advance. So you're setting a reservation in advance for, you're probably getting one hotel room. And then when you actually arrive at the hotel, you'll walk up to the front desk, say, "Hey, I'm here to check in." And by the way, I'm well aware that you can actually do this, bypass the whole front desk with like doing the smartphone app kind of thing. Roll with me here. Just pretend like we are going to the front desk for this analogy's purpose. So at the front desk, generally speaking, what they do is they ask you for your driver's license or some sort of identification. And so this is really analogous to authentication. So as we were talking about, who am I? Am I the right person that is coming up to fulfill my reservation and be able to stay in this hotel? That is what the front desk hotel clerk is doing. They're looking at my ID, verifying that I am who I am, and yeah. So then, generally speaking, most hotels these days operate using key cards. So you're familiar. It's like the plastic little credit card like thing where so the hotel clerk is going to hand you that. And then that hotel key card is going, this is where the analogy of authorization comes in. So think about the different rooms of a hotel. So generally speaking, you've got your hotel room, and then you have a bunch of other hotel rooms, of course. And then you have like the pool space in most if the hotel offers a pool. You have the like a fitness center. You might have a VIP lounge, those sorts of things. And your hotel key card is only going to work for the things that you have booked and paid for. So what I mean by that is, if I were to, for most people, that is going to be, most people would just get get access to, like, pretty much everybody gets access to the fitness center and the pool. But understandably, your hotel key card is only going to work for your hotel room. Naturally, you can't go walk up to the hotel room next door and use your hotel key card because whoever's staying in that room probably doesn't want you in there. And so with that, and the thing to keep in mind about this key card is, the nice thing about it from the hotel's perspective is let's say they were actually still using physical keys, like a physical metal key, and they were trying to you use that to unlock your door or whatever. What happens if me as a guest, I walk off and I check out of the hotel and I never return that key? Well, then the hotel's kind of screwed a little bit. Then they have to go and change the lock of the hotel room. I could technically still sneak back into the hotel and get back into that hotel room with the key. But the nice thing about the key card is when I check out of the room, then even if I still kept the physical piece of plastic that represented the key card, I would no longer be able to get back into the hotel room. I wouldn't be able to get back into the fitness center. I wouldn't be able to get back into the pool, etc. So that is the idea of authorization. So let me recap that really quick once again. So we have authentication. That is analogous to you walking up to the front hotel desk, verifying I am who I am. And then we have authorization, and that is analogous to I have my key card, and my key card only works for certain things. And then after a certain point in time, the point when I actually check out of the hotel, then the key card essentially expires. And even though I still have the physical piece of plastic, it's no longer good for anything. So I hope that from a conceptual perspective, that is really it. Now, let me check my notes really quick. I want to verify something. There it is. Okay, so that is that's authentication and authorization with a hotel analogy. Now, back to, let me share my screen again here. So I was mentioning before, we've got some interesting verbiage going on in here. Like I said, I did not know what OpenID necessarily meant before. So I actually thought it would be helpful to walk through a little bit of the history, high-level bird's eye view of the history of how OAuth 2.0 came to be. So let me navigate back into here, and you'll see I actually wrote this all out. And again, so I did, obviously I used ChatGPT to help me with the research, but I asked ChatGPT so many questions over the last 2 weeks that it's not even funny. And then I compiled them all myself, hand wrote. I typed it, of course, hand typed all of these notes here. So let's talk about the earliest history of security authorization in general. So back pre 2005, you might be aware, well, even to this day, there are still many websites out there that whenever you sign up for the website to get access to the website, you're giving them a password, or you're inputting a password, and then they are responsible for storing and maintaining that password, which is a risk depending on whatever website you are using, because that website could be insecure, or they may be nefarious and they could take your password and sell it to somebody else in theory. And so that's not ideal. And so people started this idea of, okay, can we actually connect identity to some sort of issuing provider like a Gmail or something? And so in the earliest days of identity authorization and authentication, what you would actually do, this kind of predates me. I mean, of course I was alive at this time, but I wasn't, big. I would have been in, 2005, I was a freshman in high school. So I wasn't super privy to this, but I guess so Gmail, if you wanted to use Gmail as your identity platform, you could, but you would still actually have to give your personal Gmail password to this random website. So you're kind of defeating the purpose of what you were trying to get around. And then the other problem there on top of that is, let's say I no longer wanted to have, I no longer wanted to use that website that I was trying to get access to with my Gmail password. Well, there was really no way to kind of unwind that. Like once the website had identity access, there was no way to revoke it later down the road. And so we scroll down here a little bit, and so then we start to see two parallel paths, and then the two parallel paths will come down, will eventually merge back together. And the two parallel paths essentially represent authentication and authorization. So fast forward to 2005, rewind, or whatever, 2005, OpenID. So this was created by a guy by the name of Brad Fitzpatrick. He was creator of LiveJournal, and the intended use behind of OpenID was to solve this problem of authentication specifically. And so he wanted a way that there was like a decentralized authority. No single corporation could control this like whatever the authentication mechanism is. And so the thing that the way I like to think about it is, so like I might be getting this incorrect. I believe that it's maybe either the EU or UK or maybe both together. People have started issuing like digital government IDs because we're now in this AI world, and if you go onto like any random website, like whether it be Facebook or Instagram right now, there's not really a clean way to determine if you're actually a real person or if you're an AI. And so you have these governments that are now starting to issue like these government digital IDs. And to be completely honest, I would absolutely not be surprised if the United States goes the same way eventually. That's neither here nor there for this conversation, but same kind of idea. It's how can we create this decentralized thing that represents my identity? That way it's not really managed by somebody else. So OpenID eventually became this thing called the OpenID Foundation, which I believe still exists today. And it started to gain traction with supporters from Google, like Google, Yahoo, and Microsoft. And so OpenID originally proposed maintaining your identity as a URL. So for example, you can see here, your identity might be something like that. Now, OpenID struggled, and you could see all the reasons for it that it struggled. So, this is exact research that I got from this is it. What am I trying to say here? These are the reasons that I got whenever I was doing my research. So I guess it was a terrible user experience for the layperson. I can understand that. The layperson's not really familiar with what something like this might be. There was a problem for phishing schemes. You had because things were becoming too decentralized, you might have bad actors that were doing bad things. And then on top of all that, I guess that OpenID was really difficult for developers to work with. So let's set aside OpenID for now. Remember, there's two parallel paths here. So we have OpenID that's trying to solve the problem of authentication. So fast forward again a little bit to 2007. Now we have a different framework that's trying to solve authorization. This is OAuth 1.0. And so OAuth 1.0, the original creation included big backers such as Google, Twitter, and Flickr. The problem with OAuth 1.0 is, I guess, developers found it overly complicated to work with. So OAuth 2.0 or OAuth 1.0, if we fast forward a little bit more to 2012, we get OAuth 2.0. Now, this is not to be confused necessarily with the modern implementation of OAuth 2.0 that we use today. We'll come back to that in a little bit. But basically, OAuth 2.0 was a redesign of OAuth 1.0, and it was just basically trying to make the whole experience easier for developers to use. So fast forward again. So let's just do a very, very quick recap. So we got OpenID. They're trying to solve the problem of authentication. You've got OAuth that's trying to solve the problem of authorization. And so then we fast forward to 2014, and then we see what we call the merge. And so the merge is basically the OpenID Foundation realized that OAuth 2.0 had won the protocol war. And so instead of trying to compete, what they did was they built a layer on top of OAuth 2.0 called OpenID Connect, or OIDC for short. And so OIDC started to add some additional things and standardizations, such as like identity tokens manifesting as these things called JSON Web Tokens. And we will see JSON Web Tokens in action later on in the stream, or JWTs for short. And that is essentially what we have today. I didn't go further, but I would imagine there's probably been minor updates over time, but that is essentially where we're at today. So now let me revisit the screen for a second then. Now you can start to see that this is starting to make a little bit more sense. So you see OpenID configuration. Well, that harkens back to this, the OIDC, the OpenID Connect. Remember, we have the merge. Now this is starting to make a little bit more sense, and why we have like some of these standard things. So I hope having that high level history gives like a frame of reference for why we have some of this specific nomenclature here. So with OAuth 2.0, we had standardization of a number of things, but we a couple things that we had standardized. So one of these was the discovery endpoint. So remember, with the hotel analogy, the discovery endpoint could be analogous to the hotel front desk. So whenever I walk up as the customer or the client, then I would go up to the front desk. And so with the discovery endpoint, it notes that every issuer must expose an endpoint that follows the same URL format. So you could see It follows this format. So basically it's HTTPS. It's going to be your issuer domain. So this could be google.com or gmail.com well-known/OpenID configuration. Now, does this look familiar to you? It should, because there you go. You could see right here. This is exactly correlative to this thing that Bedrock Agent Core was asking for right here. So connecting to that. So what the discovery endpoint returns is things like what the authorization endpoint is, what the token endpoint is, and some of these other things. Now, a lot of this is abstracted behind the scenes from you. Like whenever you actually call up to like the discovery endpoint, a lot of this stuff is going on behind the scenes. So we don't really have to know a whole lot about these things. But one thing that I do want to call out here specifically is the scopes. So remember, with authorization, we want to be able to identify that a specific user, like back to the hotel analogy, they only have access to a specific hotel room, no other access to the other hotel rooms, and then everybody else might get access to, the pool or the fitness center, and then maybe if there was like a VIP lounge, I guess maybe only VIPs would be allowed into that. So that's what the idea of scopes is. And then, so whenever you configure OAuth 2.0 with issuers like AWS or EntreID, basically what's going on under the hood is you're interacting with the URL to fetch the discovery JSON. That reads the JSON web keys URI. It validates ID, token signatures, and it extracts standard claims. Now, what are standard claims? And again, if this is a little bit hard to kind of conceptualize, we will be doing hands-on coding or like doing some setup. Like I said, we're going to be setting things up with AWS Cognito and with Azure EntreID. Now, to be very clear, this is one of those either or things. Like you would pick one issuer and you'd go one of those paths. It's not as if you need both Cognito and EntreID to set up OAuth 2.0. I'm just showing two different ways. There's actually a ton of different ways you could set this up. I'm showing these two ways because these are two of the most popular ways, Cognito and EntreID, that is. And so whenever you actually generate this JSON web token, you have what are called these standard claims. And within the standard claims here, and again, we're going to see this later on in the stream, you have a couple of things that are generally associated with a JWT that is issued from one of these issuers. So first thing you have is ISS. So that stands for issuer. That's going to be who issued the token. So whether that be Cognito or EntreID. Next, you have the sub, and that stands for subject. That represents the unique user ID. You have your audience. That represents who is the token intended for. You have your EXP, and that stands for the expiration time. So again, back to the hotel analogy. So you don't want these tokens to be living forever. You only want them to be living as long as is required. So in the hotel analogy, that would be as soon as I check out of the hotel, my authorization should stop. Like I should no longer be able to use that hotel key card for any purpose. It just basically becomes a dead piece of plastic at that point. And then finally, you have your IAT, and that stands for issued at time, and that just represents when a token was originally issued. Now, I want to pause for a second here because that kind of covers OAuth 2.0 at a conceptual level. However, I do want to address really quickly, you might be wondering, like I was, why OAuth and why not API keys? So if you've participated with these streams before, especially if you've ever interacted with the OpenAI API, you'll recognize that we actually use an API key and not OAuth authentication. And so the first question I had is that a less secure path? And the answer is actually yes, but that doesn't mean it is not. That is not a viable method. So you might be wondering, if it is a less secure path, why would I use an API key and not this OAuth authentication? And the reason for that is well, there's two reasons. Number one is maybe you're not concerned with authorization. So with like the OpenAI API, for example, there's basically whenever you have your API key, as long as you're still paying or you have credits associated to your account, OpenAI doesn't really care which models that you have access to. And they might be doing some things behind the scenes that are also helping to manage access, but it's not being done with OAuth. And then the other thing is simply speaking, it is just easier to set up an API key. So the problem with OAuth, and let me share my screen again. The problem with OAuth, these OAuth tokens is, yeah, we have our issued at time and we have our expiration time. However, time zones. So basically, if like when you start to think about time zones and stuff, then you have to start managing like how to deal with when, like, let's say I got a token issued on the other side of the world. If I was in China or India or something like that. And how do I, the United States, kind of manage that? That's kind of tricky to do. Like, it's possible, but it's tricky to do. So a lot of people, if they don't need authorization, they want to keep things simpler, they'll still go the API key route. And that is still a valid method of security. Although I would say, I would wager to guess that OAuth 2.0 is still probably a more secure path. So I also should have mentioned, I am taking questions on YouTube or LinkedIn. So if you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. I'll do my best to answer as much as possible. Again, this is because I'm not a cybersecurity professional per se. This was hard for me, very hard. And you'll see as we go through Cognito and Entra ID that it doesn't get any easier because both of them do things radically differently. Okay. So let me take a sip of my drink, pause here for a second. Whew. All right, so let's actually just go ahead and start jumping into doing things with AWS Cognito specifically. All right, let me check my my notes here. Scroll down to Cognito. Okay, so, and again, I do have all the Cognito steps in here. This is basically what we're going to be following through. All right, so over here, I got my AWS account. This is my personal AWS account. The first thing that we're going to need to do is we are going to go into Cognito here. And then you should be greeted with some sort of screen like this. Now, in order to actually set up OAuth 2.0 through Cognito, we're actually going to click this hamburger menu up here. I don't know if you can see that. Let me zoom in that for you. We're going to click that here. And then you'll notice that we have user pools and identity pools. Now, we are actually going to be set. I should say you can set up OAuth 2.0 to work for human users. So, like, if I am, like, let's say I wanted to get into GitHub. Like, if I wanted to sign up for GitHub, and I wanted to, sorry, I lost my train of thought there because I saw the question. I will get to that question here in a second. All right, I'm just going to get to the question because I lost my train of thought. So the question here in the chat is, does an API cover both authorization and authentication in one key? Well, so technically I guess the short answer is kind of yes, but like technically speaking, there's no authorization there. Like basically the API key is only authentication because there actually is no authorization mechanism per se associated to that. Now they might be doing some things behind the scenes for authorization. So like if OpenAI, for example, if they had like a beta API that they only wanted to have access to like certain things, then they might be doing something behind the scenes there. But that's a good question, and I probably answered that poorly, so I apologize for that, Mike. So anyway, so we have our Cognito, we have our user pool and identity. Oh, that's what I was talking about. So you could actually set these up, OAuth 2.0 up for if you're a human. So if I wanted to like log into LinkedIn or something, you've probably seen it before. You like to click the sign in with Google button or the sign in with Facebook button. You actually kind of see it up here with a screenshot. Where it says like continue with Facebook or continue with Apple. That is OAuth in action right there. So we're actually going to be setting things up for machine to machine. So, and the reason we're setting things up for machine to machine is you can imagine with like my interest in Bedrock Agent Core, you got your agent runtime, that's going to be or your agent itself, that's going to be one machine. And then you got your agent tool, maybe that's an MCP server, that's going to be another machine. So we're going to be setting up a machine to machine. So, in terms of AWS Cognito, it's a little bit confusing because you see user pools and you see identity pools, and you might think, well, I need to use identity pools. And that is actually not the case. So identity pools, this from what I understand, identity pools in AWS Cognito is really more of like an AWS specific kind of thing. So like, for example, if I was a machine, like if I wanted to call some sort of AWS service from like a Raspberry Pi, like I got a Raspberry Pi sitting over here, then I would actually set up an identity pool, because then I could actually set up the identity to connect to like that AWS specific service. But if I wanted to just do like general OAuth, then I would actually want to set up a user pool. So let's go ahead and set up our user pool here. You'll see I've got nothing here. We'll click this create user pool button, and you'll see that you got to define your application here. So like I was mentioning, for our specific use case today, we are going to be doing things machine to machine. So we'll actually select the machine to machine button. You can name your application whatever you want here. I'm just going to keep the default here. You probably can't see because my face is in the way. Let me move my face out of the way. We can just simply click the create user directory button here. And so what this is going to do is this is going to create our holistic user pool. And so now if we go back into the user pools, now you can see that we have our user pool here. We'll click into here, and then here, let me pause for a second and read my notes. Then we can start doing things that would actually set ourselves up for actually working with OAuth here. So want to note two things off on the left here. So the first thing, and again, this is where it starts to get confusing. Remember, we need to be mindful of our discovery URL. So from my local, the way that we're going to be demonstrating things is we're going to pretend like I'm a client that is represented by my local MacBook here, and then I'm going to authenticate with OAuth that I'm setting up for with Cognito right here, and we're going to be doing the same thing for Entra ID later on in the stream. So if you come down here into branding slash domain, so let's go ahead and toggle this open. So that's what this is. So this is more or less the discovery URL. So we are going to want to capture this domain. Now the thing with that, when we actually want to, the thing about this, when we actually want to invoke this from our local machine, we actually need to take this domain, and then on the end here, we need to append slash OAuth 2 slash token. And you'll see that again here in a little bit. So I'll capture that here in a little bit. But remember, we in terms of authorizations, we need to apply what can somebody do? Maybe it's read, maybe it's write, maybe it's update, those sort of things. And so in terms of Cognito, the way that Cognito manages it is with this thing called a resource server. So you can see whenever you actually go through the console interface here, you'll see that by default we do get a default resource server. So let's and we are going to need to make note of this resource server identifier. And because this is going to be how we kind of know what scopes that we have access to, or should have access to. So I am actually going to go in here and edit this. So by default, Cognito creates just a single scope, a single read scope. For the purposes of our time here today, we're going to add another one here. We're just going to add another one. We're going to call it write. We're going to give it a description of write. We're going to click save changes, and there we go. We have added a new scope here. Now, we're not done here in the interface yet. You'll notice over here on the left nav, we have another thing over here called Applications App Clients. So this is going to be where we actually manage each of our application clients. So let's say we have like 5 or 6 downstream application clients, and we want to make sure that they all have the appropriate authorization, making sure that they have only the access to whatever they need to do whenever they need to do it. So we can go here into the app clients, and you'll see that by default again, whenever we created this user pool through the console, that it created this app client here. Now, whenever we toggle open this app client, you can see a couple of things here. We've got our client ID, we've got our client secret, and we're going to need to make use of these, and we'll get back to this in a second. But the first thing that we need to do, so by default, it did associate the one read scope that was already applied whenever we first created this through the console. But remember, we added that write scope as part of that resource server. So now we need to give this app client access to the write server. Now, where do you think that is here? Let me tell you, it's not where you think it is. It's under login pages. Again, this was such a confusing stream to put together. So we're actually going to go into login pages here. We're going to go to edit, And then if we scroll down to the bottom here, we can see our custom scopes, and you can see that by default, it already added the read scope. So if we want to add the write scope, simply what we do is we go down, we toggle open this menu, we can see the write scope that we've added here. Click that, click save changes, and we're good. And that is effectively everything that we needed to do in the console here. OAuth 2.0 from the console's perspective, from the issuer's perspective, from Cognito's perspective is good to go. Now let's jump into a Jupyter notebook and demonstrate how we can actually call up to Cognito to actually get an appropriate JWT that will represent our appropriate authentication and authorization. So let me go ahead. We're going to go ahead and create a new notebook in here. I'm going to call this Cognito stream IPYNB. Let me make this a little bit bigger for y'all. Okay, I'm gonna so let me go ahead and here, let me look at my notes again down here. We're going to be toggling back and forth between Cognito and VS Code here because we're going to need to come back and get a couple of pieces of information here. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to do a couple of imports, these are all general standard Python libraries. Some of these you may actually will need to pip install. So we're going to need OS. We're going to need JWT. We're going to need import JSON. We're going to need import base 64. Since the JSON web tokens are encoded with base 64. They're encoded with base 64, and then we're going to need requests. So these are all pretty standard Python libraries, nothing really fancy here. And then I am also going to, if you notice over here on my left navigation, you can see that I have an environment file here. So we'll get back to that in a second. So I'm going to put .env import load env, and then we're going to do load .env. And then we're going to load the env file. Basically what this is doing, and I'm actually going to show this because like the values in here, so these are sensitive values that I am displaying right now. The reason I'm not concerned about this is because right now, so this is representing something that I already deleted before, so these don't really mean anything, and I'm going to delete them after the stream again. So you might be wondering, why am I just not hard coding them right into the notebook? And that's actually a GitHub reason. There's actually a thing on GitHub that if GitHub sees that you've uploaded a sensitive credential, it will actually block the upload, and then it asks you to like basically unwind it out of your Git history, which is a huge pain in the rear. So that's why I just went ahead and stuck it into this .m file here, because if you could see, it's grayed out, meaning that this .m file is not pushed up to GitHub. So that's the only reason that I am using a .m file here. Although you should, I guess in real practice, you should never expose these things. And you might be wondering, well, is this essentially the equivalent of an API key? Kind of in the sense that you don't want just anybody to have access to this, and that kind of goes a little bit beyond the scope of my understanding. I was even asking ChatGPT myself this, like, why is this like, how is this really any more secure if we still have this string of characters that still represents something that's very similar to an API key? And ChatGPT had an answer. I don't remember what that answer was. So anyway, so let's go ahead and so let's go back into the interface here. So we do need this client secret. So I'm just going to copy this to my clipboard. I'm going to go back to my M file here, and then I'm going to set this value here. I'm going to say, put that right there. Now I'm going to go ahead and run this cell. Load.env. What did I not? Oh, duh. Load.env. There we go. Okay, so now basically what that did was, so if I go to, well, I'm going to go ahead. So if I say my Cognito client secret equals os.environ. Now recall, basically what this .load.env thing is it's basically seeing whatever is populated as part of here and loading it up as an environment variable. And so you could see that our environment variable name is this Cognito client secret. And then, so then if I were to just show that, then you could see it right there. Again, I'm going to delete all this after the stream. So again, technically speaking, this is a sensitive credential, but because I'm deleting everything well, not even after the stream, we're actually going to delete it even prior to the end of the stream, just to walk you through what delete looks like for yourselves. So this is, again, sensitive, but I'm deleting it, so whatever. And it doesn't matter right now. And this is not even wired up to anything, technically speaking. So it's not like you could even do anything with this JWT other than get a response back saying, hey, I have access to something. So, all right. So we need to capture a couple of other pieces of information. So we need to capture our Cognito client ID. We need to capture our Cognito domain. So that is, again, our the thing that represents the OAuth discovery endpoint, and then we need to capture as well our Cognito resource server ID. So Cognito resource server ID. So we already captured the client secret. So let's come back over to here. We need our client ID. So that's going to be right above the client secret there. So we're going to grab the client ID, and then I'm going to put it here. Now let's go back into domain. And then we're going to go to our, you can see we need our resource server identifier. So I'm going to grab this here. And then I'm going to stick this right here. So we need this. And then finally, we need our domain. So that is up at the top here. Now I'm going to copy this to the clipboard. Did that copyright? I did not copyright. There we go. Now, recall that I mentioned that we do actually, this is actually not the correct value. What we actually need to add on the end here is /OAuth 2/token. Okay, so now that is all the information that we need here, essentially. So let's go ahead and start. Oh, I guess we do need to define our scope. So so this is the other piece that kind of confused me. Sometimes you actually have to pass in what your scopes are. So for Cognito, it actually does expect you to pass in your scopes, which is, again, kind of confusing to me, because like when I think about like the hotel analogy, why am I telling the hotel manager that I need access to this room number, or I need access to the pool or whatever? I feel like they should be telling me that. And so you'll see actually with Entra ID, it works a little bit differently. We don't actually, so sometimes you do have to pass in scopes, sometimes you don't. With Cognito, you do have to pass in your scope. So we're going to define our scopes here. We're going to say scopes equals. So we're going to do an F string here. So we're going to do our Cognito resource server ID /read, because remember we got two of these. So we got read, and then we got another one of these, Cognito resource server ID /write. So that's going to represent our scopes, right? And then we're going to join these together. So we're going to, as a holistic scope. So we're going to say scope equals empty string dot join scopes. Okay, so that's all of our very specific information. The rest of the code we're going to be applying here. So like if I were to tear down the user pool that I already created in Cognito and then spin it back up, I would have to go and repopulate some of this information, but everything else on here, we're not going to have to repopulate. We just write it once and we're good. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to base 64 encode our Cognito client ID and client secret together. So we're going to call this encoded secret equals base 64 dot b64 encode, and then we are going to say, I do another F string here. We're going to say Cognito client ID, Cognito client ID slash, not slash, colon, Cognito client secret. And then we're going to say dot encode with UTF-8. And then we're going to come back here and then decode it. Now, you might be wondering, because I was confused by this myself as well, why does it appear that I am immediately encoding it and then decoding it back again? Technically speaking, that is actually, we are not undoing what we just did. I'm so confused. But basically what I'm saying is here is like, it appears that we're encoding it and then immediately decoding it, but that's actually not the case. It actually still is technically encoding it. It's just a little bit weird. we're going out of my depth here, folks. Just roll with me here. So we've encoded our secret. So let's actually go ahead and set our headers now that we're going to be passing into Cognito. So we're going to say headers. So we got authorization, and then we're going to say base. We're going to do another f string formatting, basic encoded secret. So that is our authorization header. And then we need our content type header, content type. And this is going to be application / x www form URL encoded. Okay, and then we also need to apply our, did I spell all that correctly? Form URL encoded. Okay. Now let's apply our scopes data. So we're going to say our, oops, forgot the equal sign. Scopes data, so we have grant type, and this is going to be client credentials. And then, comma, and then we have our scope, and this is going to be the scope value. I guess technically speaking, that should be lowercase. So Python doesn't really enforce this super strongly, but basically, if you're not aware, like if you all caps a variable, that's supposed to represent a constant value, and then a lowercase value represents more of a variable kind of value. So I guess technically speaking, that should have been a lowercase scope. What did I do wrong here? Oh, I forgot the comma right there. Okay, so that's all that. Now we're actually ready to go ahead and pass all this information in to Cognito and get our JSON web token back. So let's go ahead and we're going to use the request library for this. So if you're not familiar with the request library, this is essentially the Python's equivalent of a curl command. So we're going to say response equals requests dot post. We're going to post in the Cognito domain. Headers is going to equal the headers. Data is going to be our scopes data. And we're going to set a timeout of 30 seconds just in case. And then we are going to actually transform the response back into JSON by doing response.json. All right, so if we look in here, we should see, okay, something went wrong here. All right, let's try to figure out what went wrong. Did I not put in the correct Cognito client secret here? Let me go back to our app clients here. Get our client secret. Maybe I didn't. Maybe I forgot to paste over this. Oh, that looks right to me. Let's do a restart and run all just in case. Okay, I don't know what happened there. It was fine though. Everything was fine. I must have run the cells out of order or something. Okay, so you can see here we got this big long string here. Let's go ahead and look at the access token. Okay, so this big long base 64 encoded string, I'm actually going to go over to another website here called jwt.io. So this is like a nice user interface if you want to actually look at the contents of your JWT. And we can actually do this in Python as well. I just want to show this website here. Make sure that you don't have the quotes around it. So I put this in here, and then you can see off on the right here we have our decoded payload. So you can see some of the standard claims that we were talking about here. So you can see sub, we've got our issuer, so we can see that Cognito was issuing the token, and then we got a couple of other things in here as well. So where's our claims table? So you can see as part of our claims table, I'm looking for scopes. There we go. So in addition to some of the standard claims, you can actually have additional stuff too as part of your JSON web token. So you can see here we have something called scope. And so as you can see, this represents each of our respective scopes here. So that notes that. And then you'll note we got like our expiration time. So it notes that our expiration will be, I don't know what that is in GMT. I don't know, to be honest. And then we got our issue date time. But we can also do this. So this is a popular website to do things with for like JSON, JWT debugging, this JWT.io. But we can also do the same thing in Python here. So in order to do this Python, we're gonna say token equals that. We're gonna say decoded token equals jwt.decode the token, And then the options will be, we're not going to verify our signature. Verify signature is false. False. And then finally, we're going to print out with JSON, json.dumps decoded token, and then we're going to do an indent to 4. And then this is essentially the same thing that we were looking on the JWT website here. So there we go. That is how you do things in AWS Cognito. And again, I do have another, so basically what you were seeing here is me following along of this sample notebook. So if you want to follow along with the sample notebook, I've even got some nice markdown headers here. You can do all the same things, and I put a lot more commented annotations and stuff here. But because it is a live coding stream, I wanted to do it live, and yeah, we did it. So that represents Cognito. So that's essentially how you do OAuth with Cognito. Now, throw all your knowledge out the door, because we're going to do things completely differently with Entra ID. And this is, again, why OAuth is so confusing to me, because I'm not sure like how other issuer providers do it, but you'll see like why I'm getting a headache even just thinking about it. So first things first, let's do a little bit of cleanup in Cognito. And fortunately, it's actually pretty simple. If we want to just delete everything, we just go back to Cognito. We select our user pool here. We go to delete, and then we click these buttons, and then we type in this name, user pool nf qvbn, and then we can hit delete. Now, one other thing I do want to, before we go on to Entra ID, is that I actually did write Terraform for all this as well. So you can actually go into well, I guess I'll show it from here. If we come back up to my repo here, if you go under the Terraform directory, you'll see I've got 2 directories here, AWS and Azure, and then I've actually created the Terraform for all this. So I'm not necessarily going to go through all the Terraform. I did put annotated comments on everything, but just to verify that it does work. All right, so we're going to clear that out. So I'm going to do tofu. So I'm actually using OpenTofu, tofu apply. I'm going to do a tofu apply here. And then if I click yes, or if I hit the yes value, we'll give it a second. Now let's go back up into Cognito. So right now, before it was nothing. So you can see if I refresh, we've got my user pool in here. You can see that I've already got my default app, my example app client up in here. If we go into domain, you can see that we got my resource server over here, and then we've already got all the applied scopes in here. So if you want to skip all the funny business of doing things through the console, I did create the Terraform. So all right, so let's. And the nice thing about Terraform, and you can see that I actually outputted most of the values. Now I can't. I'm not sure how to unmask the sensitive value, but basically this is all the same information that we would have needed from. That we applied as part of my code up here. So let's do a tofu destroy then. Tofu destroy. And then this is going to delete all my value, delete all this stuff up in Cognito. So if I go back to user pools again, I refresh, and now it's gone. All right, that completes Cognito. Let's move on to Entra ID. Like I was saying, throw everything you know out the door because if you might think that things are similar with Entra ID. No, not at all. It's so frustrating. All right, so let's. So this is Azure, Microsoft Azure. So this is the Microsoft cloud platform, very similar to AWS in concept, cloud service platform. Now, the first thing that we want to do is we actually want to go into app registrations here. And we need to create 2 app registrations. We need to create one that's going to represent our whatever API that we're wanting to lock down, another one that's going to represent our calling client. So let's go ahead and do the API one first. So first up, we're going to do a new registration. I'm just going to call this my API, keep things simple. And then we don't need to do anything else on this page. Don't worry about this. I'm not worried about this thing right here. So we're just going to click register. Okay. Let me check my notes here really quick. So you'll notice there are a couple of similar correlates. So things that we are going to need to capture here, and we'll come back and snag them in a little bit when we actually write the code. We're going to need to note the client ID. We're going to need to note the tenant ID. And then, so now let's go ahead and apply the authorization things. So in Cognito, that was scopes. It's a little bit different on how it, so technically scopes do exist as you can see here under the API, well, is it API or expose an API? You can actually apply scopes here. But if you want to do machine-to-machine authorization, you actually don't use scopes in Azure. You use this thing called app roles, and we'll create app roles here in a second. But I got a little bit ahead of myself. So let's pretend like we had just created this app registration. We do need to expose that OAuth discovery endpoint. So the very first thing we need to do is we need to go down to expose an API. We'll add the application URI. So you can see here, let me move my face so I'm not in the way. Okay, so you can see this edit application ID URI. You can keep this just as the default value. I personally just keep it as the default value. We'll click save. We are going to need to note this, but we'll come back and get it after we get everything else set up. So we just did that. Now, like I was saying, whenever we want to actually set up the scopes, if you will, we actually do need to set them up as app roles in this instance. So we actually need to go into app roles here, manage app roles, and then we need to create 2 of these app roles. So you can see off on the right here, this interface. So we can call the display name whatever. We're going to create a read one. We're going to create a write one. So we're going to say read. Allowed member types, because this is a machine-to-machine, we are going to select applications. For a value, I'm just going to say write. Not write, read. And then description, we're going to do read. So, and then also you want to keep, do you want to enable this app role? The answer is yes. So we'll just click apply down here. And now we need to do this a second time for our write app role. So we're just going to say writers. It doesn't matter what this display name is because that doesn't have any forbearance here. I'm going to click write or type write, and we're going to do right here. So now we have applied we have created the app role. So we are now done in here. So let me move my face once more down to there. All right, so let's go back into app registrations. So we've created the host client ID, if you will, or not client ID, app registration. So let's go back into here. We're gonna now sometimes you do have to click like this my application so you can thing here so you can actually see our entry here. We need to create another one of these for the actual client. So we're gonna call this my client. Same thing, don't worry about anything else down here. We're gonna go down, click this register button, register, and then again we've got a couple of different things in here. Now we do need to all right, what do we need to do here? I don't know why my notes are poor here. Let me check my other notes over here. Okay, so first things first, we need to go to API permissions. Now this is actually where you grant access to the API roles. And this was a little bit of a hacky thing. We're actually going to need to do this in 2 places. Before we even add the permissions, you can see this button here that says grant admin consent for default directory. Click that, and you'll see why I'm confused later on. Oops, that went away. Yes, I'm going to click yes. And yeah, and then we need to add our permissions here. So when we click add permissions, you'll notice we've got this interface over on the right here. We're going to go over to APIs my organization uses, and then you'll notice down in here that we've got our entry here that we created earlier. So we got my API, and then you'll notice the different app roles that we can actually add permissions to. So we're going to add the permissions there and do it that way. Now, we are not done. We actually have to go into another place. So remember this verbiage here, grant admin consent for default directory. So right now we are in app registrations. Now we are going to go to enterprise applications. So the easiest way to do that is just going up to the search bar, typing in enterprise applications. You can see that I've already searched it, so it's in my recents. So I can just click that simply here. You can see our 2 entries for enterprise applications. I'm going to go into my client. I'm going to go into security permissions, and then we need to click this button here. Do you see what that button says? That's the exact same darn button that we just saw before. Now, but it wouldn't work for me unless I clicked it here and there. I'm so confused. So I'm going to click it here. Now, the one difference with doing it here is you'll notice that I'm actually having to authenticate with my my personal like I have MFA set up. I use Microsoft Authenticator here, so I'm actually going to have to give particular specific permissions there. So I actually did have to do it there. I don't know why I had to do that in both places. That, again, so confusing why I had to do that there and there. And I don't know why it's, I hope that did that right, Grant. I might have to do that again. All right, next, accept. Why is this not doing anything? I have not had this issue before. Okay, maybe it worked. Maybe it worked or maybe not. We'll cross our fingers and hope it worked. Usually this blank screen closes down by itself, but I'm going to assume it worked. Okay, so now we actually need to, well, let's start a new Jupyter notebook, and we're actually going to start, because that was essentially everything that we needed to do to set up Entra ID. So let's create a new notebook here, new file. We're going to call this Entra ID stream, and I'm going to delete these stream notebooks later, because again, I do have a full Entra ID example notebook here that you can reference later if you'd like, but we're going to do things live. What is that meme? There's like a meme of like some newscaster. I don't remember who it was. Maybe it was Bill Maher. Not Bill Maher. What was the guy that wrote like Killing Lincoln and stuff? That guy. It was basically like he was live on camera and but didn't realize it. And he was getting mad at his producers. And he's like, all right, we're doing it live. We're doing it live. And so that's what I kind of feel like right now. We're doing it live. All right. So let's, now the one thing that we're actually going to need to use here is we're actually going to be using a specific Python library called MSAL. That stands for Microsoft Authentication Library. And so simply if you want to do that, you do a pip install MSAL, or I'm using UV. So you do UV add MSAL. And then that's how you would make use of that. Okay, so let's go ahead and let me look at my notes here. Okay, we're going to need to do a couple of imports right at the top. Let me close down this terminal. Import OS, import JWT. Some of these are going to be similar to what we saw last time. JSON, import MSAL, import or from .env, import load .env. Okay. Load .env. .env. Now you'll notice I actually did not create the client secret yet. So if I come into this file here, we have this thing called Entra client secret. I actually did not generate that yet. So let's actually go back into our app registrations. Let's find our client again, and then if we go down to manage certificates and secrets off on the left navigation here, we'll toggle that open, and then we can create a new client secret here. So when we create the new client secret, it's just going to ask for a description, dev. I'm just going to call it dev, and then you can set when it expires. So we're going to click add, and then you can see the value here. Now, when we refresh or navigate away from this this interface, we won't be able to see that client secret again. So if we want to be able to see that client secret again, what we're going to have to do is essentially create a new client secret, or delete this one and then create a new one. So I already copied it to my clipboard just to make sure it starts with KPC. So I'm going to put stick that in here, KPC. There we go. And then I'm going to go ahead and run this cell. Okay, so we've loaded that. Now we need to set all of our information. So we're going to need a couple pieces of information. So first thing, Entra client secret. Obviously, we just populated that as part of our local.m file there. Environ, Entra client secret. Then we're going to need a couple of other pieces of information. We're going to need the Entra tenant ID. We're going to need the Entra client ID. And then we're going to need the Entra server API. Okay, so let's go and fetch all this information back from Azure. So I'm going to come back into overview here. So the tenant ID, this is going to be the same across both of our registrations because they're both part of the same tenant. So we're just going to copy this. We're going to stick this here. All right, then we need the client ID. So it's, accidentally toggle that close. Grab the client ID. And then we actually do need to go back to our API registration. Go back to app registrations, all client, no, API, there we go. And then we need to go back to expose an API. Now recall we have this application ID right here, and that's what we're looking for. Exactly what we're looking for. Equals that. Okay, so that's all the information, proprietary information there. Everything else here is going to be reusable code, but if I were to tear down these app registrations and then build them back up again, we would need to resupply all this proprietary information that we've generated here. Okay, so this is how we're actually going to use msol to help us actually retrieve our token. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to create this object that's going to allow us to connect to Entra ID using msol. So we're going to say Entra app registration equals msol. Oh, I guess one other thing I should refresh here again is I mentioned that sometimes you do need to pass in scopes like with Cognito, that was required. That is not required exactly with Entra ID. You can, but for our purposes, we're not going to. msol in confidential client application. I don't know why I'm not getting an auto populate. Not an auto complete. You can see down in the bottom right hand corner, I've got actually my GitHub Copilot snoozed right now. But I should still be seeing like some sort of like basic autocomplete. So client ID, Entra client ID, not DI ID. Then we need our client credential. So this is going to be the client secret, Entra client secret. And then we need to pass in the authority. So that's going to be our OAuth discovery URL. So that's going to be represented by the Entra server API. Now we do need to do a little bit of f-string formatting here. Authority equals https login.microsoftonline.com/ and this is where we pass in the tenant ID, Entra tenant ID. Okay, so now we are ready to actually fetch the token. So we're again, we're going to be making use of the same msol object here to actually do the fetch of the token, as opposed to with Cognito, we use the request library. But I would imagine behind the scenes, it's probably doing something rather similar. It's just that, you know, using msol is a little bit different. Okay, so we're going to do response equals Entra app registration dot acquire token for client. Now, we're just going to get our default scope. So we're going to say scopes equals, we're going to do a little bit of f-string formatting again, Entra server API / .default. Okay, we don't actually have to specifically note the read and write as we were noting before. It'll still note that we do have, in terms of authorization, that we have read and write, and we'll show that in a little bit, but we don't actually have to supply it when we pass it in. Okay, and then we are going to get the token from the response. Token equals response access token. Okay, now hopefully that token did generate. Yep. So let's go ahead and go back into jwt.io here. All right, let's, I got to get rid of these front and back quotes. Okay, now if we look at the decoded payload off on the right here, you can see here that we got all the same standard claims that we were talking about before: issue, who issued it, issue at time, audience. And then if you scroll down further here, you can actually see it notes our roles here as write and read. There we go. Now we can do the same thing in Python. Again, I just want to show it as part of this jwt.io website. I am not clicking the right thing. Okay, so what we want to do here is then, well, I'm just going to copy and paste it because this is basically the exact same code that we saw before. And then you could see that we could decode it, and then we could see the exact same information that we're just seeing above. So there we go. That is Entra ID. All right, that basically covered. Now I do want to show the Terraform thing again. So first things first, let's go ahead and delete all this stuff to make sure that we're not keeping anything lingering out here. So the way that we do that, let me move my face again, is we're going to go into each of these app registrations, and then you could see a delete button up here. So I'm going to click delete. I understand. Oh, my face is in the way. I understand, and then delete. Okay, so that one's deleted. And then we're going to go to my client, delete. I understand, delete. Okay, so we've cleaned all that up. Now, like I was mentioning before, I did create Terraform. So if you want to see the Terraform, you can simply go up to my Terraform directory and go under Azure. And then you can see all the Terraform stuff. Now, I do want to show the Terraform really quick just to highlight one thing. You might be wondering, what is AzuRead stand for? Well, that's actually Azure AD. And so if you're not familiar, so Entra ID is actually a newer name. So Entra ID actually used to be called Azure Active Directory or Azure AD. And so that's why whenever you still write the Terraform, it's still using that old nomenclature of Azure AD. But essentially, we're doing all the exact same things here. So what we're looking at here is basically the Terraform block that actually created that first API app registration. You can see we defined our API, our app role. We got our identifier, URIs, and then yeah, so let's go ahead and do this in Terraform now. All right, so I'm gonna go up, we're gonna go into Azure, and then we're gonna do a tofu apply. Yes, it's gonna create the stuff. Okay, and we're done. So now you can see that we got all the same information that we needed from before. And just to verify, if we go back up to our app registrations, do a refresh. That's a funky name. What is that funky name? Oh, that was so weird. What was that about? Okay, that was strange. I had not seen that before. All right, so but you could see that it did effectively create the stuff that we need up in here. So if I wanted to destroy this all, so we're going to do a tofu destroy. And it, for some reason, it takes like a few seconds to actually do a tofu destroy on these resources here. So we'll give it a few seconds. I mean, it takes a little bit, but not like crazy long. Like maybe like 30 seconds to a minute. Okay, we're getting close. It will be done here any second now. There we go. Done. All right. That basically wraps up this whole stream. So I do want to, again, just highlight here, if you want to go back through and do all this stuff yourself, I took extensive notes back in my GitHub repo here, and I even put like a start here kind of thing. If you want to, this README more or less covers the exact same stuff that we covered in the stream today, including the conceptual stuff, talking about authentication versus authorization. I talk about the hotel analogy, even talking about how I went to Great Wolf Lodge a couple days ago, which was a lot of fun, by the way. If you got young kids, I don't know if teenagers so much would enjoy it. Maybe it depends on your teenager, I guess. But my kids are, they're 8 and 9 years old, and we had a great time. It was a lot of fun. Definitely would recommend. And so we did that. We got the history in here, and then we got all. We talk about the discovery endpoint, standard claims, and then we got all the same steps that walk you through Cognito, and then I even link the documentation off to Cognito if you want to do things. Now, the reason I didn't capture screenshots or anything, part of it was because of laziness, but the other part is that both AWS and Azure are constantly changing the user interfaces. So if I captured all the screenshots right now, they may be like irrelevant in like 2 months or whatever. So I didn't find any use in doing that. Plus, I created the Terraform too. And then we've got all the same steps for Azure AD. And that's it. So I hope you gain now an appreciation, a fonder appreciation for our cybersecurity friends, because again, my head's still kind of spinning from everything that we had to do today, and especially the fact that like the way that Cognito manifested it and the way that Entra ID manifested it was so completely different. Like it was just so strange to me. Like I would have expected them to be a little bit more similar. Kind of like if you've used like, well, with like our large language models, like if we call up to the OpenAI, or if we call out to like the Anthropic API, or if we call to Bedrock's implementation in Anthropic, extremely similar. I would have hoped to see a similar correlate between Cognito and Entra ID, but unfortunately that's just not the case. So that's all I wanted to cover for today. I'm going to wrap it up here. Hope you all have a good rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one.